Welcome back to the Access to Future. It's a collaborative series between the Access Control Executive Brief and Acre Security. I'm your host, Odess, and we've been on this journey exploring the trends that are reshaping the industry. In episode 1, Kumar and I established a foundation with our shared vision for the security landscape. Episode 2, with Justin, we revealed how customer expectations are fundamentally driving change in what we build and how we deliver. In episode 3, we had the chairman of Acre come in, Steve, and we explored the talent transformation that's reshaping organizations from within. And in episode 4, Sarah, she showed us why security is evolving from standalone products to integrated platforms. Today, we're going to be diving into one of the most transformative forces in our industry. It's the evolution of data and artificial intelligence. You can't go anywhere without hearing about it. And I'm thrilled to have Jeff Groom, Director of Engineering from AI at Acre Security, join me, who I've known for quite a while. He brings a unique perspective to the conversation as someone who has been at the forefront of implementing AI solutions, especially in the security industry early. And he understands both the tremendous potential and the practical challenges of bringing this intelligence to our systems. So Jeff, thank you very much for being here. Before we dive into the technical aspects, give us a little bit about your background and how you found yourself leading AI engineering in a security space and at Acre.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lee. Great to be here. I have just under 25 years experience in the industry. I spent a lot of time working on hardware and software in consumer electronics. Initially, I was in the cellular mobile space. Then I made my way to Silicon Valley and worked in semiconductors. And from there, I transitioned into the automotive sector, and that's where I first cut my teeth on machine learning applications for self-driving or autonomous-driven vehicles. And then I think about 6 years ago, an opportunity presented itself for me to start a company, operate a company that was focused on like modern data stack or modern data platforms to try to take advantage of the abundance of data that's being generated specifically in physical security and just try to sort of operationalize and activate this data. And was doing a lot of custom solutions and then decided to saw a gap or an opportunity with the proliferation of things like ChatGPT that maybe these kind of things can be applied to any industry, and then build some product, that we branded as Rex AI, which was targeted on, improving operational efficiency, specifically with integration of packs and adjacent systems. And then had some conversations with Acre, and we decided to join forces and try to take what I had done and build that product out as part of the Acre portfolio.
Yeah. So on that, you could have applied it anywhere. So why in this space, and what was compelling to do it? And then also, what are some of the challenges that you see of why you were interested? I mean, autonomous vehicles to physical security. Yeah. I think most people would think people would go from physical security to autonomous vehicles, right?
Yeah.
So why'd you come to our industry? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, so the truth of that is, so I partnered with my brother who has a steep career in the physical security space. And we decided that we were going to focus on building product. And we actually started trying to do conventional ML models for physical security. And we leveraged that network and that business development strategy. And so our focus was like, how are we going to go out and actually build quality product for physical security? We just said, this is the space that we're going to focus in. We looked at it as a vertical. And then, like I said, I saw it as an opportunity too, because the way I have an interesting perspective being an outsider. You talk about this transition from maybe physical security to something like Silicon Valley or self-driving vehicles. But the physical security space is fascinating for me because my view has always been that, and this is changing, but that the technology sort of maybe lags by 10 years. So like it's ripe with opportunity to drive innovation when it comes to technology. And as ChatGPT sort of came on the scene and exploded, I had this vision that in the future, everything is going to be like a text or a speech-driven operating system. And I sort of look at it like the technology that we're building specifically at Acre and in this industry in physical security. These are modern cloud-based systems that are no different than anything that's going on anywhere else. And so it would only be natural that you could apply AI to it. And I thought it was interesting when I first started building Rex AI. I thought that I was way ahead of the curve and that nobody was really thinking about how to do this in physical security. It turns out that a lot of people are actually rolling this out now because it's becoming so mainstream. But I was like, I wanted to be the first one and sort of try to change the industry or revolutionize it, so to speak, and bring AI here. So it was very exciting for me, actually.
Yeah, it's the other part that I see. I'm actually here in Silicon Valley for meetings this week, and it's
nice.
It's interesting. That some of the mundane, if you want to call it, boring industries are typically the ones that are the most practical and ones that are being used by the majority of people. So actually, the impact opportunity that I'm seeing here, just from the meetings that I've had, it's actually a place where a lot of people are putting some energy and effort. Because frankly, I look out the window here, and I mean the amount of buildings and every single one of them has an aspect of it. So it's just a fundamental utility, and the ability to apply it to utility, I think, excites people, as well as there's money going into it as well, which is a motivator for people on that end. And then the value of keeping people safe and using technology to do so. So talk to me about how the relationship between, because this is fundamentally data, right? In a lot of ways. So how has the relationship between data and intelligence changed in security over the past few years? And I don't even know if you had to guess like how many years that would be, but how has data and intelligence changed?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing that I see is the volume of data, especially with the adoption of cloud, right? So with on-prem systems, like it's harder to get this data is sort of trapped. And prior to coming to Acre, it was really about how do we get this data out of silos so that we can activate it and operationalize it. And for me, like we really care about mostly video data and event data when it comes to access control and PACs. And I think that historically that's always been the case, but now we have a very high volume of data that we have maybe more access to, and that we can do interesting things with and sort of scale newer solutions or newer technologies. That's how I see the main difference over the past handful of years.
All right. Well, and I guess what are some of the challenges that you've seen with managing and processing this type of data? Because you're right, that has been sort of we'd have a log file, and then we had video that would show us the thing that was in the log file, and like that was the data stream that we've had. Or people would want to pull data of who had access and when, and alarms and things like that. So, but what are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing in managing and processing this data, and how are modern platforms, like we like to talk about the sort of the incumbent legacy way that they've done it, but like what are some of the modern platforms and how they're handling those volumes?
Well, yeah, to me, it all, big data used to be a buzzword, and it's not really anymore, but it all comes back to, I'm going to harp on this point, the volume of the data, right? So the challenge is really, as you start to amass a glut of data, like you need a lot of storage. And if you want to apply AI to it, you need a lot of compute. So you have these technical complexities, and it all comes back to, you really need to have a fundamental architecture that is cloud-based and that has modern components so that you can actually get to the data, you can fetch the data, and then you have enough compute to process the data. Those are certainly like the main challenges. And then from a platforming standpoint, it's all about having this connective tissue. Like I come back to the API. If we have an API that is broad and deep, then it makes getting access to that data much easier than trying to like do a point solution to get the data. So, yeah.
All right. So it's also, I think, just building with these things in mind, it probably evolved how the data is handled and what the rules of engagement are, the way it's stored, like all of those things that I believe now, if we're being honest, a lot of the legacy systems weren't necessarily thinking with this in mind because it didn't exist at that time. So it's going to be interesting to see how they evolve, but then also how these new systems that come in and are going to just fundamentally have them as like baseline architectures of what they do, but then also the change that happens in roadmaps, because now the value creation that is there based off of having real applications for the data is going to drive a lot of that. And as you think about that, now that we move from like data to say the utilization of it in AI applications and security, where are you seeing some of the most impactful implementations of AI today in security?
Yeah, sure. And one thing I wanted to touch on real quick that I kind of alluded to, but didn't really double click on, is that another challenge is the fact that it is difficult. I think it is more difficult or challenging to apply AI to on-prem systems. Like if we think about AI as like primarily computer vision, and then the use of like large language models to leverage natural language or text or speech, like you can kind of handle the computer vision stuff at the edge now, but like running a really powerful language model is really difficult to do at the edge. So like you're sort of limited by default out of the gate if you're running on-prem systems. So like this shift to the cloud really enables that. I wanted to touch on that. And then, sorry, can you ask the question again?
So that's okay. You triggered me to ask a question then. That being true, like on-prem systems with the compute at the edge, do you see possibly that transitioning though? Like if I think of like things NVIDIA is doing and some of these other people, right, where that the processing power, if I think about the evolution just in my first phone to the one I currently have now, which literally blows my mind that I've been traveling all over the place. When I'm on an airplane, I rarely take out my computer anymore. Like I'm literally using my phone, and it's the same thing as this MacBook that I have in front of me that we're using to go do this. So I think about the evolution there. Do you think that's just a point in time, or do you think that that'll be a truth that will exist because the power of the cloud will always maybe be a little bit more fluid than the sort of absolute that once you buy this thing, like this thing is this thing, right? So what are your thoughts there?
No, I think it's an inevitability that we will push more power to the edge as the technology advances. I don't know what that time horizon is, but I certainly think that's possible. And I think that what goes hand in hand with that, you look at, like you said, you look at companies like NVIDIA, and they're certainly trying to sort of pack this power into a smaller form factor. And I think that one important thing to think about is that if you adopt what I call narrow AI, so like let's think about language models. Like if you want to use a language model and you want to converse with the system, if you limit the scope of what you want it to do and have a very narrow task, then this is going to become possible much faster because we don't need as much power in what the language model can do. Maybe it doesn't have to reason as much. Like it's very straightforward in terms of what it can do. I don't think the cloud is going anywhere. If you look at the trend in the general AI language model industry, like what has happened is like in order to get more capability, there are these scaling laws that have to be followed, and that simply means like you need more compute and you need bigger models. So you have these massive models, and you see people like NVIDIA and others investing in these massive data centers. Like they're going to spend billions of dollars that take a lot of energy, and like as that progresses, the cloud's not going to go anywhere, because if you want to run the most advanced frontier models to do human level reasoning and conversation, you're always going to have the need for like remote data centers in the cloud. But you will be able to push some of this tech to the edge in a more narrow scope in probably a matter of years here.
Yeah, it makes me think a couple of things. Probably realistically, this all goes back to a hybrid type model, right? And the evolution, just like again any of the technology that we have, what is seen as bleeding edge now, they figure out how to make it work, with less energy, less everything, more compact because it's been around for a little bit, and then some of the newer stuff, and then frankly, like you said, there's laws of gravity in all of this, like so there'll be a use for it in whatever the formation that is needed in order for it to do what it needs, but it's not a zero-sum game of this or that. Now there may be rules that are in place that say it's better to do this because, like you're saying, the energy side of things of like what it takes to do some of this compute as those things get better, like you're better off using it here. It doesn't make sense to go to the cloud, or it doesn't make sense to do it at the edge because you need it. So yeah, you can see, which is fun because it's like we're still figuring this out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that at least today, my view is that there will be many of the customer base or install base that are still reluctant to move to the cloud. So if we want to figure out how to solve AI problems for them, then regardless of all the things you just said, we have to find a way to enable the compute at the edge or at the private network where they're going to run isolated on-prem systems that just will never have access to the cloud.
Yeah, on that. So, and this may not be an area of expertise for you, so let me know if it's not, but as I've been traveling around, there are certain parts of the world where they haven't figured out yet how they're going to adopt cloud, but yet they're investing heavily in AI at the same time. So it feels like it's almost like talking out of both sides of the mouth in a way, like that you'll invest all of this energy in AI, but if you don't adopt cloud architectures to work, you're not going to necessarily get the upside of what the investment that you're putting in there. So is this sort of, we're just on a track, it's not a case of if, it's just a case of when in a lot of cases, to where they, and then how they do it versus like these, we like to have these binary, like they're net, like for instance, in Dubai, they're talking about not a lot of cloud adoption on that end. They want to keep everything close in country. And because of that, it's like, you could feel that they're eliminating some of the growth that you would anticipate seeing from, an area that talks about all the bleeding edge stuff of what they have. But then you go there and, some aspects like access control are still back 30 years ago. So is this just a case of how and when, not if? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a how and when. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding in the industry around the cloud in particular. This thing that you touched on where people are investing in AI but are very rigid in old thinking about we have to have on-prem on-prem PAX systems or physical security systems to keep it safe. I think the eventuality is that they will realize that, for example, we know of people that have tried to do their own on-prem versions of cloud, and the customer finds that it's actually just very difficult to maintain that, and it's a lot easier to from a maintenance and sort of operationalizing it to use the cloud. And the cloud is in fact very, in my opinion, can be just as safe or secure as on-prem. And so, yeah, I think it's a matter of just how and when. It's an eventuality. We have to break this old idea that on-prem is the only way to be safe. I mean, the cloud is just somebody else's computers or hardware somewhere else. And if you have a good trusted partnership with them and they do better, they might even do better at security and maintenance than you would on-prem. And so it could even be better. I think eventually everybody goes to the cloud. It's not optional.
Well, yeah, I mean, my opinion, it's the word you use there is really, it's the trust and comfort side of the adoption of this, and inevitably it will. I mean, my personal opinion is the quicker we get the hybrid, and just I don't know why we would limit ourselves. A lot of times I feel like our industry does it. We mention things in a manner of which we didn't have them before. So it's like, because we had on-prem, we're like, we will talk about is the cloud, when you can, I haven't been convinced otherwise that this isn't going to be a world where you're going to see both, with an application. And frankly, most of the cloud is already, there's like local compute that's going on anyways at the edge in some of these devices, and it never does go out to the cloud. So like, we're fundamentally doing it. It's just, I think it's some of its positioning and where we put resources. Anyways.
Yeah. And I just wanted to touch on one other quick thing. I didn't really articulate my point, but the fundamental misunderstanding I was saying is that, like you mentioned, everybody wants to invest in AI because everybody has been told you have to have an AI initiative right now, no matter who you are. Like, it's just part of the thing, right? And that's fine. And if you do it with intent and intentionally and you're mindful, that's a great thing. But to me, the interesting thing is that the hybrid model is great, but I think AI is going to be one of the driving factors that escalates the cloud part of the hybrid. Like, I don't really think in the near term you're going to be able to effectively execute your AI initiative and strategy if you don't have some component of the cloud. So what's interesting to me is AI might actually be a little bit of a catalyst to push this industry into the more hybrid model or have more cloud components.
Sure. And that would mean that AI, though, would have to be delivering some impactful implementations of things, right? So what are you seeing as some of those impactful implementations of AI into security today?
Yeah, so for me, and particularly at Acre, and I see it across the board, I think, our friend Ryan from HiveWatch calls this the trend of efficiency, right? So I think that's how he says it, or the efficiency trend. And for me, it's like the most impact that we have today is how can we maximize efficiency in terms of the way that we are already currently operating our systems. And I have this sort of long horizon vision of autonomous transformation, where what we really want to do is elevate the user's capabilities and sort of have very powerful systems that automate, or with some autonomy, take care of the mundane tasks so that we can get freed up to use our creativity and do other things. And so I don't know if I drilled down enough on that, but that's like, automating.
Yeah, the mundane task thing is an example. Do you have like an example of like give a mundane task that you've seen in security?
Well, yeah. So for example, like one that we know of that's out there already is like reducing false positives for alarms based on your SOP. Like this is something that AI can fundamentally understand and operate on your SOP and try to reduce false positives.
What do you say to people that, though, like, say, well, we were doing that, we could do that before, and how is that AI? Like, I mean, is that an AI application, or is the title of it the same, but it's a different way of solving for? Like, what is the answer to that?
So the big thing for me is the flexibility that you get from the advent of language models, and it's something that I call, or that is called, natural language processing, and that's what truly makes it like AI for me. So if you told me that we're already trying to automate like our reduction of false positives, and we're using a rule-based thing. Well, what's interesting is that if I'm a manufacturer, I can develop something that's very flexible, that actually understands the intent of your SOP, that might be different from company XYZ's SOP in terms of how you deal with alarms or false positives. And so like the layer where the model can actually understand a written document and then carry out the automation, to me, is really the crux of it. So the automation might already be possible, but we open up all these doors if we can think of the system as like sort of a human level, something that's human level, that can understand different artifacts and documents and instructions and then carry those out without having to reprogram the machine. So I build one black box, and I can take your SOP and I can take the SOP down the street, and it'll operate the same way and then carry out the task. And so I do see that it truly is an AI thing, and it's nuanced, but there's an element of it that you can't do if you simply do conventional, like heuristic or rule-based implementation of these kinds of systems.
Click into that just a little bit, because I do believe this sort of evolution from rule-based to machine learning in a lot of ways that you're talking about, that is what's changing in a lot of this, where it looks like and smells like, so we think it is it, but it's actually an evolution in a lot of ways of those. So can you just talk a little bit more, like so rule-based systems before were like this, and machine learning is this? Like, can you break that down a little bit for me?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to say it in a way that's relatable. So if we just think about, let's just not talk about security for a minute, but just talk about like trying to model human language, which was done for a very long time with like symbols and rules. And it turns out that that's very hard to anticipate all the different rules that you could come up with. Like, it's just really a difficult task. And so it turns out that if you build a model that can look at a large amount of data and extract patterns from that, then it's much better at solving the problem than if you try to direct it. And it's sort of broken into two different things, like classical machine learning, where we talk about maybe predictive analytics, where we're trying to predict something. And the same thing goes, right? If I have a big amount of data that's so complex in many dimensions, it might be hard for me to even think of what the rules should be, because I don't really know what the patterns are, and I can't even guess. And I might overcorrect and do rules that don't actually make any sense, or I might miss a lot of rules. And if I actually just present the data to a statistical model or a machine learning model and let it understand what the patterns are, then we have a high degree of confidence that it's going to have better accuracy and make better decisions, whether it be prediction or trying to write some text or whatever, because of how it it looks at all this data and it sort of compresses this data and all the patterns in it into the machine learning models or the large language models. And all, you can think of it like all that data sort of lives inside it, even though it doesn't. It's like a representation of all that data. And so that it can rely on that data as opposed to us guessing like which parts of the data are important and which rules to write. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's sort of the way that I look at it.
All right. So question on that though. So like, always leads to this sort of like the relationship between AI and humans as we talk about mundane tasks. We talk about, and I'm not even getting into the replacement conversations on that. And it's more of just I guess it is a little bit, but like what is your thoughts of the relationship of the evolution of like AI replacing human judgment versus augmenting, like because that's in some senses you're talking about that, right? Like it kind of reminds me of like the when we were talking about sort of the sort of rule-based systems, like if this then that, right? Where it's like I wrote it to go do this, and like it just did it. If this happened, then that happened, right? It was never like, oh, I think this happened, or like it just straight line. This seems to be the ability to bop around and go and do, and then even augment. So like, what are your thoughts around like? How do you see the relationship evolving around this idea of like replacing human judgment versus augmenting, especially in security, where it's sort of like we gravitate to like, Tom put his eyes on that image, so there's a level of assurance based off of that. We can argue whether that actually is assured or not, but we have comfort in that. So like, how should I view this?
Yeah, I always try to relate these things back to not just physical security, but like general technology. And let me first and foremost say that at Acre, the first approach is not going to be to remove human judgment. So even in some of the mundane tasks that we are trying to automate, we will have what's called human on the loop, where like the human still has to validate the judgment that the system made. And I think that this is like important to do initially because the technology is not there yet in terms of really being able to trust these things to go off and do whatever they want. Now, I think the long horizon view is that at some point the technology will get good enough that we will, if we want to take advantage of the optimization of efficiency, that we will have to inherently trust the system as we would trust any other human. And I look at things like something as simple as like, the airplane. Like the airplane was dangerous when it first was being designed and developed, and there were probably casualties. But over time, like now we get on planes all the time and we don't really worry that that's going to be a problem. And I think that the same goes for any kind of technology, whether it's in physical security or not. And the onus and responsibility is going to be on the people that actually make the powerful technology and the language models to try to present the data in a way that these things are trained such that like they will only exhibit the kind of human behaviors that we expect. And this is wildly unknown right now. It's very difficult for even the people in Silicon Valley that are pushing this stuff forward to truly look inside and understand what's going on. And it's very possible that there might be emergent behaviors that we don't see where these things don't do what we want them to do. And so alignment of these systems to human desires and values is very important. And we'll just have to wait and see if it gets there. And at that point, I would expect that we would depend on that, just like we would depend on Tom to put his eyes on it and then carry out the task.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it easily goes to dystopian, like a lot of things we see with biometrics and everything else, because frankly, there are some people that do some really shitty things.
Yeah.
But it's not typically the normal what they do. But so, all right. So, but that leads a little bit into, we hear all the positive, it's all, rosy and the rest, a lot of when it comes to these conversations, especially two people that are very pro, if you would, this evolution and change. But if we're being honest, there are challenges that do come with these things. So like, what are you seeing? Let's talk about the technical hurdles, if you would. So what are some of the biggest technical hurdles you're facing when you're implementing AI into security?
Yeah, let's just talk about agents. So we're taking a big pro stance on agents, and agents are agents are going to be the way of the future.
Define agents for people that are interested in or maybe don't know what it is. What's your definition of agent?
Yeah, that's great. So we can think of an agent as a super smart assistant that can think, remember, and use tools and act on your behalf. So what's important is that it's still a piece of software, but it's non-deterministic because it can actually kind of make some of its own choices and carry out actions. And so we need like regular check-ins, we need monitoring, we need feedback. And so, yeah, I mean, that's essentially the risk. The big challenge there is, like I just said, is that, the industry has found, and I mean the industry outside of physical security, but the language model industry, that if you sort of challenge these things to behave unethically, that they might in fact make those choices on their own. So the big challenge is, how do we implement guardrails, monitoring, observability, so that we can trace every decision that an agent makes and have a high degree of confidence that the agent is only going to make a subset of choices that we present to it, that are choices that we deem reasonable or that are allowed. So that's a huge challenge when it comes to implementing agents. And I just want to say that agents are not there yet in terms of being really reliable. This is part of my long horizon vision on autonomous transformation, and we certainly want to push this tech forward at Acre, but we take a very narrow approach where any kind of agent that we're going to implement is going to be very narrow in scope in terms of the tools and decisions that it can be that it can make. It's going to be heavily guardrailed and governed in those decisions in the early days in phase one of rolling out these agents.
Yeah, no, I you can see a lot. I mean, there's a lot of investment, a lot of conversation. I mean, for those that have used agents, you see the value of it sort of like out of the gate on that end. But like you said, yeah, that's somewhat. I define what you're saying there as like a purposeful reason, not just to do it. That's it. But you can see, I mean, after you engage with them, it's not far off. You can see sort of what the future will look like. And on that, so if I was to look at, ahead, this is called accessing the future. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what AI capabilities should the security industry expect to see, 2 to 3 years, which may seem short, long, I don't know, but I have a feeling a lot's going to happen in the next 2. But like, from your point of view as an expert in this, like, what should the security industry expect to see from AI within security?
Yeah, 2 to 3 years, I see like this big shift in automation of mundane tasks, like we talked about, and then out past that, I see the industry moving in the same direction that every industry is going to move, I think, and that's that like cloud will give way to vertical agents, and that's going to be the way of the future. I really think that's a thing. I don't know how many years it's going to take. That we as a people have a lot of work to do on the agents that we just talked about, but if we can get that nailed down, then we can build systems that still stand on the shoulders of cloud principles, but they're much more flexible in that we don't have to define specific business logic. We have agents that are very sophisticated, and what we will see happen is seamless integration into adjacent systems outside of just access control or intrusion or things like that. We'll see, we've talked about smart buildings, that's very adjacent. We talk about HR systems, but like we can go beyond even that into systems that we're not even thinking about that may be that drive value into PACs and things that we're working on. And you sort of have this seamless integration layer, and you just ask the agents to do things and they figure out how to the interoperability problem on their own. And that sort of like changes the game in my point of view.
No, I agree. I look at the way we configure systems, especially with the more data that we have. Like, I don't have to think real hard to imagine a day that you're talking to a system saying, I'm a restaurant, I got 3 locations, 10 employees. These are the categories that they have. I want to give them, configure my system, and I'm going to go. Like, you don't have to be that imaginative to see where that is happening. Yeah. So as we wrap this up, because we're running into time here, what's your biggest piece of advice for security organizations that are looking to implement AI, and where should they start? Or, because they're hearing it too in the pressure. So like, I got a call from somebody the other day who was probably the last person that was thinking about AI, and he's just like, where should I start? So what advice do you have with somebody that wants to start thinking about this?
Yeah. And so my classic answer here is, it's not even a technology it doesn't even start with the technology. It's first of all, start small, understand your data, and understand the efficiencies that you're trying to drive. You really want to understand the use case that you're going after. Everybody right now wants to just have AI because it's very fashionable to have AI. But this goes back even before ChatGPT to like machine learning models. And if you don't know where your data is, if you can't get to your data, if you don't have clean data, and you don't have a clear business case that says these are the efficiencies that we want to drive, you're going to have a difficult time. Now, we're hoping that at Acre, we're just going to enable our customer base to do that so that they don't even have to think about that. They can choose our platform, and like that's all going to be baked in. Like we've figured out which of your data is important and what you need, and we're going to show you these are ways that you can drive efficiency. But if you're outside of Acre and you're looking to start, like really understand the problem that you're trying to solve first, and then partner with somebody who understands the technology, and it becomes just it becomes academic at that point, and it's just an exercise in executing on it.
Yeah, no, well said. It's like running a marathon. Just don't put your shoes on and run. You gotta train. You gotta make sure you get the things proper and work your way into it. And then also, like you're saying, there will be also in parallel tools that are built for people based off of just basic understanding of the industry, and they'll be able to sort of turn them on and decide to want to go do so. And then for those that are a bit more engaged in it, they have the ability to build. And I think that's, a good, I think, and what I hear you saying though is there's an aspect of curiosity and making sure you have the fundamentals in place in order for it to be successful. You can't just AI for AI's sake. So bring in the experts, have a high level of curiosity, but just make it a priority that says, yeah, we're going to do something, and let's go figure out what that something is on that end.
Yeah, and just know your use cases. If you know your use cases, everything will fall into place after that, for sure.
Cool. Well, Jeff, thank you for bringing that technical domain expertise, and really, in my opinion, I think you bring more than anything else is a practical perspective to the conversation. So it's clear, in my opinion, AI isn't just a future addition; it's a today forward thing. It's a fundamental transformation, if anything, because of the language change and the initiatives and the rest. Not only the practical side, but it's now bringing in new voices, new money, everything that's going to impact the systems. In our next episode, we're going to explore how the technical advances are reshaping go-to-market strategies and business models. So again, we've kind of gone vision, product, market, so we're going all over here what the future looks like. We're actually going to have Paul DePazo. He's going to be joining us to discuss how companies are adapting their sales, marketing, and delivery approach to the new reality. For our listeners, the AI revolution of security, it's just happening now, right? So the organizations that understand both the potential and the practical, like that Jeff talked about, are the ones that in the end are going to lead this. So keep the conversation going, share your AI expertise, challenges, questions with us on LinkedIn, social media, engage. We're all learning together on this. And as you see, you've got experts like Jeff that are doing that. So thank you for listening to the Access the Future. I'm Odess. Jeff, thank you very much for doing this, and we'll see you all next month.